How much of who we are do you think is shaped by our fears?
Mm, that's a good one. You know, when I think about fear, it's an emotion, right? And so our emotions shape so much of who we are, of our perspective of the world. And fear is a really, really big one because we are wired for it. It has an incredible purpose in our lives. And so it has a dramatic influence on the way we live, how we think, how we view other people, the decisions that we make or don't make. So it has quite a bit of influence. And I'm curious because when I think about, shaping who we are, fear is just like one aspect of us. So I'm really curious, what about fear made you choose that word?
I say fear because I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to taking action, we tend to use positive words such as
Mm,
passion and almost things that we get drawn to.
yeah,
But I also do think there's this element that fear can be a driving motivator to start action because we're drawn away from something.
oh,
And
absolutely.
I started this podcast because I'll be honest, I think I was fearful in the sense that
Mm,
I was scared of living a lifestyle that I was currently on the path of. And I said, I don't want that. And I think
yeah.
that's what led me to this podcast. It's not like I was had this massive goal of becoming a podcast a few years ago. I probably listened to my first podcast a year and a half ago. It's just one of those things that came to me
Yeah.
because I was scared.
Mm. So you have like a pretty intimate relationship with your own fear and the way that you face it. I'm really curious about that. Um, I think what you said in that is really true. There are two types of motivators that we have as humans. One is we want to move towards something. In my world, we would call that a positive motivation. We want to move towards a feeling that we want to experience or a life that we want to live, and that can be really powerful. And what you're describing is moving away from something, which we would consider a negative motivator. I want to avoid pain, avoid sickness, avoid suffering in some way. And so we want to move away from it, and both serve a really powerful purpose. And it's really the going back to the first question of this idea of how much of our fear shape who we are. I think it really depends on your relationship to your fear, your relationship to your emotions in general, because for some people, a fear can be a sign that, oh, I need to avoid that or ignore that because it's too big to face. Or like you have done here is, I'm afraid of something. What can I do to motivate myself in the direction that I actually want to go?
And is there a positive element about fear that we can actually use? Because I know you use the word negative motivation, but does that actually mean
Mm.
it's a negative feeling?
Well, negative doesn't necessarily, yeah, I mean, negative feelings are negative feelings, but that doesn't
Yeah.
make them bad at all. And so it's just kind of moving. You want to avoid something. You want to avoid feeling a certain way or avoid a negative outcome. And so that can be good. Can, if I want to take care of my health, I don't want to get sick. That being sick is a very negative experience. And so, but the motivating me to do something positive for myself that can come from that for sure.
Yeah, but at what point do you think using fear can be unhealthy? And I think using fear is healthy at the beginning because it worked for me. I am scared at the same I am scared at the same time that if I'm so focused on the obstacles, I can never be focused on the path.
Mm. Well, there is something to be said about what we are focused on, we'll often see proof of and find. We have confirmation bias. So if you're constantly thinking about what you don't want to experience, you're likely setting yourself up to not enjoy the process or to eventually even experience that thing because you're very, very focused on it. So I think it has a place. It's interesting. So my coaching is based in positive psychology. And so what we learn is it's negative motivators and fear. absolutely has a place, and we want to honor that and get to know it and have a really kind of intimate relationship with your own fear so that you can understand it. But we actually want to add to that positive motivator. So you're thinking more about what you want. It's kind of the same as if you were going to start an exercise program or change the way you're eating because you want to avoid, you know, heart disease. That's because that's so big and negative. We don't often want to like keep that in our mind. But what we want to do is like that can be there, but we also want to utilize a positive motivator of, but I want to feel vibrant. I want to be
Mm,
able to do these things. I want to run and not get super winded. I want to wake up and have so much energy so I can focus on the things that I love about my life. You're going to find a lot more, I think, energy around the positive motivators. So if you have, I mean, I would be curious to hear about your fear, to be honest, when you're talking about starting this podcast, if you want to share, like what, because when we're thinking about the relationship that we have with our fear and how we can utilize it for our good instead of just a constant reaction, because that's the thing is if you are just constantly afraid, you'll be reacting all the time of just how do I survive, how do I survive, like how am I safe and okay, and that never leads us to thriving. And so for you, like when you can understand this fear is here for an important reason, what is it trying to tell you? You know, what was your fear moving you away from to lead you here?
maybe this is an abnormal fear. I don't know. Maybe this is not a great fear to have, but I think I have a fear of being normal.
Mm,
And for me, normal is, I associate that with failure. And then
mm,
I think I actually fear failure more than I desire success. And my bar for failure is so high that I'm trying to
mm-hmm,
reach this bar just to survive and not gain.
mm. That would be exhausting, I think.
It is a bit, I will be honest, because I think I tend to tell myself that I'm very good at analyzing, but then a part of me is like, I tend to overanalyze everything, and I feel like
Mm,
that can be a curse at times because
mm-hmm,
I'm an overthinker. I will be honest, and I pride myself on being able to being reflective, but at the same time, I wish part of me was not as reflective on myself.
mm. Yeah, blessing and curses, right? Um, I'm curious, what about failure is so fearful, like so fear-inducing for you?
It's because maybe this is subconscious. I'm trying to give you answers that I think, but I don't know if they're actually true.
That's okay.
I think it's because I'll speak on myself. I grew up in a family where I know I was privileged growing up. My parents worked very hard for my life to be privileged. So if I
Mm,
don't reach a certain bar that I set myself up for, that these
mm.
privileges allow me to reach, that for me is failure.
So there's really a lot of, I mean, most fears are subconscious, by the way. And so it's a lot of like getting to know our fears is kind of looking under the rocks of like, what is under this? Why am I so
Mm,
afraid of failure? Why would, you know, this idea of me not utilizing my potential or my privilege or, you know, is it harming my parents? Is it making their sacrifice or their hard work all for nothing? What does that say about me as like who I am and my identity? And typically, what we find under our fears is this fear of, you know, not belonging, this fear of abandonment, which is a very intense fear because as humans, we need other people. And if we don't have other people, if we don't belong, then typically that means exile and death. And it's very unconscious, right? Because these days we're like, that sounds ridiculous. My parents aren't going to, you know, peace
yeah.
out if I'm normal.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like that's our fear is evolutionary. It's we're really hardwired for it because it helps us survive. It serves that purpose. And these days, when we're not running from, hopefully, bears or actual life threats in our day-to-day life, it can show up as, well, if you don't, hit all A's, or if you don't find exactly what you want to do and make a ton of money and are incredibly successful, then, what is your life even worth? Like that's a heavy thing to look at. That makes sense why the fear would feel pretty great.
Where do you think we, as a general, or even like let's say the people you work with, where do you think we tend to attach our self-worth to?
I think, well, when we think of self-worth, it's worthy of what? And I think a lot of us are thinking of worthy of being loved, worthy of, taking up space, of being alive. And that to me is very inherent, but unfortunately we attach these things to, who am I to my parents? Who am I to society? Who am I to my peers as we're growing up and we're trying to develop an identity and try to figure out, where do I belong in society? Um, how can I find meaning and a place and for myself in life? We attach it to all kinds of things. I think in the culture we're in the West, at least, we attach it a lot to success and what society tells us is successful, which is a very dangerous thing. And I think it's normal for us to do that, especially in the first half of life. And then hopefully in the second half, we start to dismantle that and think about, wait, but who am I on a soul level? And if my worth has never really waxed or waned, no matter if I fail or succeed, then what do I really want with my life?
What's dangerous about that definition of success that you brought up earlier?
Well, when we attach our worth to things that are somewhat uncontrollable, but outside of ourselves, a little bit more superficial, how you feel about who you are on a deep level will be dependent on things outside of yourself. And that's an unsteady place to be.
Yeah, I spoke to Dr. Anne-Laure LeCompf, who's a neuroscientist. She just came out with a book called Tiny Experiments,
I've
and
heard
she
of that,
talks about
yes.
this idea that we tend to make linear goals, and the results tend to be relying on external factors, and our definition of success is then reliant on external factors. So, to give you a broad example, let's say with this podcast, I want to get 10,000 downloads in the next week.
Yeah.
And completely hypothetical, let's say I don't sleep a second and I record a podcast for every second that I'm awake. And I look back in a week and I got 200 downloads. Was that week a failure? Probably not, because I literally did I did everything that was possible. But yet, because the result is not in my control, I view it as a failure. Yet, if I change my
Yes.
perspective now and say, how do I operationalize this goal for it to be in my control? Let's say I record a podcast a week for the next year. So but when that year comes, I can now look at it and go, did I do it or not? Rather than
Yeah.
the result of that goal being in a different realm that I can't control.
Well, when we think about that too, I think about the what you're saying, like, what do you think 10,000 downloads is going to like do for you? What do you envision that, changing about your life or who you are?
It's ego. It's ego. I'll be honest. And I do think I have a. I'm not saying I want 10,000 downloads this week, but I will say I think a lot of my goals are from ego.
Well, sure, most of them are. Most of our goals can be, and that can be okay. I'm not like a ego is the enemy type person when it's aligned with like who we are on a deeper level. It serves an important like purpose in our psyche. But I think the other thing to think about with the other goal of, if I record one podcast a week for this amount of time, like, yes, there's output and there's potential outcome for that, but also what we're looking at is, who are you becoming when you're doing that? How is that changing you on a deeper level? It's making you consistent. It's building your self-trust, that builds your self-efficacy. There's confidence that can come from that, versus if you had 10,000 downloads, you're probably not going to feel the same way about yourself for long term.
And I will say, I think the reason I cling on to certain statistics are because I think they're just easier to access. For example, it's hard for me to measure in even empirically or statistically or numerically the change in the person I've become. It's very hard to reflect on that. But when I look at the
Yeah.
numbers on my YouTube, my podcast, I can go, oh, well, I've only got 2 subscribers this week. That means I haven't done enough.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, you're kind of giving yourself, you're discrediting your being as a whole in a way when we think about that from like a linear perspective, which is it's a very masculine energy, a very masculine thing to
I
do,
appreciate that.
right?
I'm kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's only half of what you are. There's also this deep sense of who am I on a soul level and my connectivity and how can I be creative? And it is hard to measure those things. It's almost impossible to measure, but you feel them. Like that's the I guess caveat there is you can't measure it, but it's also like a something within you that shouldn't be measured. It's like deserves more than being measured.
So, how do we give ourselves credit even when a tool to measure doesn't exist?
Well, I think, did you enjoy it?
I love recording podcasts. Yeah,
Yeah, beautiful. You enjoy it. Are you learning?
I hope so. I believe so.
Yeah, so you're growing. Is it changing you? Is it making you a better human, a kinder human, a more compassionate person?
That I don't know. That's where like I struggle to. It's not that's not a no. It's just I struggle to answer that question because I don't know how I can answer that question because it's not like I have statistical data to back it up that I'm a kinder person or I'm a more compassionate person. It's tough to analyze that.
Yeah, sure. I think that's something you can feel though. You start noticing I'm being a little less judgmental to
Yeah.
people. I'm having a little bit more awareness of my own insecurities, of my own things about myself that maybe I don't enjoy, and I'm less reactive to people. It's not something you can like track probably and keep, have hard data on, but it is something of I'm noticing the way that I am in my relationships and with the people in my life is shifting.
Yeah, and I will say I struggle to reflect on my current self. However, I do think I can easily reflect on my past self. So, like, I can tell you now that the person that I was feeling, like the person that was here 9 months ago, how they were feeling, because I now have a comparison to make. If like I
Yeah.
have a bar that I've overcome, or it's easier for me to tell you that, oh, Rishi Kurata was not as happy during this part. He was way happier during this part. I can't tell you how I was feeling now, but I can definitely tell you how I was feeling back then.
What do you think is hard about being able to tell me how you're feeling now?
Oh, that's that's tough. Maybe it's because I don't have a set bar that I'm always looking at, and my bar is changing constantly that I can compare my current self to the previous bar that I had a few months ago, and I can say, well, Rishi Kurata's happiness, like for example, let's say right now, I don't know how happy I am, but I can tell you that I'm happier than how I was a few months ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know if my happiness now is at 100%, 75%, but I can tell you that it's 10 more percent than what it was a few months ago.
Yeah. It's hard to put percentages on emotions sometimes.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think I would encourage you to think about instead of trying to measure it, just ask like what is going on with me? And that's part of the emotional intelligence piece that is so valuable, especially as you enter the world, if you're going to move into entrepreneurship, like understanding what's going on for you, what you're feeling in the moment, because emotions are data. I mean, if you want to talk about data, emotions are data. When you can understand what each one is trying to alert you of. Typically, emotions, the negative ones specifically, are trying to tell you, hey, there's a need that you have that is not being met. And we need to get your attention so that you can meet this need, so that you can understand and be informed on how to move forward in your life in this exact moment. Because that's the thing about emotions and life in general is happiness, especially. Like it's not a linear thing. You know, everything has seasons, and all seasons, whether they're full of positive emotions or negative emotions, have their importance for us. Something to learn, something to grow from.
I will say I did use the word like happy before. I try
Mm-hmm.
not to get wrapped under this concept of happiness just because you can tell me your thoughts. I think happiness can also be very perspective based. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like I don't want to say it's a choice completely, but I can be financially not in a great spot and I can be
Mm-hmm.
financially in a very great spot, but I feel like the way that I look at each point in my life that I'm in dictates my happiness, not what actual position I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It can be perspective based, it can be health related. There's so much that goes into, the way that we feel in our state, and happiness is can be quite fickle sometimes too, and it absolutely depends on our perspective on things. Gratitude makes a huge difference, and I don't know with happiness, but I think overall life fulfillment, um, and that perspective shift, a genuine sense of gratitude, is really, really powerful in improving your overall perspective of life. So we know that. And there's a study done years ago where they discovered that people have a set bar, like about 60% of your happiness is pretty much set with your basic makeup. And then the other 40% of your happiness is how you can your perspective, the actions you take, like that's within your control, which is an interesting thought process.
And how do you optimize that 40%?
Well, I think it's individual, thinking about what helps you feel happy, what helps you enjoy your life, what makes you feel purposeful and fulfilled, and prioritizing those things, prioritizing, perspective and mindset, and, focusing on the things that you actually can control in your life.
A lot of this seems to be very self introspective, which
Hmm.
like having conversations about because I think one of my, like I said earlier, blessing slash curse is that I'm very self introspective. I
Hmm.
do wonder, especially with all your clients that you have and as a mentality coach, how do you help analysis paralysis? And when I say that, I mean
Mm.
people that are stuck in their mind, people that have a broken mentality right now. How do you think your way out of a mind problem?
Well, I think we get to the root of why they're stuck, why they're feeling paralyzed a little bit, what's going on for them. Typically fears, what are the fears that are there? And one of the best things um, we do is start to develop a growth mindset, which is very different from fixed. When you have a fixed mindset, it's very much success, failure, win, lose, which for the majority of our lives, especially in the way schooling is done, we are hardwired to develop because it's you get the A or you fail. It's, you get an award or you win the game or you lose. And it is very black and white fixed as we're growing up. And then you get into the world, especially in entrepreneurship, and their like success is always shifting. There is typically not a one way to win or lose. It's really about, am I trying? Am I being curious? Everything is an experiment. Everything is, I'm learning constantly. And if I do fail, then that's actually just lessons for me to apply and get better and learn and move on to the next thing. And so a lot of analysis paralysis is this idea of it's very fixed. It's if I do this, I will succeed. If I do that, I will fail. And you're so scared to make the wrong choice that you end up not making a choice at all, which ultimately does lead to failure in a sense. And so it's really about understanding why the fear is there, where it's coming from, how you can meet the need that it has for you, but then embrace the growth mindset and play and experiment with what you want to do.
Yeah, the fear of starting anything is quite universal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's I had it, and I think that's in a weird way maybe that's what drove me to start the podcast, because it's
Hmm.
almost like, Reesh, you are so scared of starting that you got to at least prove to yourself that you got to start. Because if
Yeah.
you don't, that means, like, in the nicest possible way to myself, you're being a coward. You know, like, and
Yeah.
obviously I'm not gonna
Yeah.
say that to other people who have that problem, but I
Hmm.
do wonder. Part of me is also thinking that, like, if I have an overthinking problem, how do I think myself out of an overthinking problem?
Oh,
It's
you
almost like there
can't.
has to be an action that has to be connected to it, right?
Yeah, you need to move. You need to act. You need to do at least one small step to get you out of that. Like if you notice if you're stuck in an overthinking, I love for me, if I'm trying to make a decision or if I'm facing fear of something, one of the best things I do for myself at least is get outside in nature and go for a walk. No intake, no music, no podcasts. I'm not listening to anything. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just getting out of my head into my body, moving and then deciding you have to take one action when you get back home. Like it's just one step in a direction. Doesn't matter what it is, you have to move forward. And so I think that that can be really helpful when you are stuck in that, like, I'm overthinking. And then trying to understand too compassionately of like, hey, why are you overthinking this? Like, what is so terrifying about starting a podcast? People do it all the time. What was so scary about it for you?
Um, because the people around me don't see me as the type of person that would run this type of podcast. Even
Mm.
if they tell me now, "Hey, I knew you're the type of person that was built for it." When I dropped my first ever Instagram story saying I'm doing a podcast, I could tell everyone was like, "What the hell is going on?" That's it was a good feeling
Mm.
at the same time. Like, yes, I've shot my friends, but at the same time, that was the fear that I had.
So, and I wonder how much that feeling was actually them thinking that and how much it was you projecting that onto them.
What do you mean?
Sometimes when we think we have these stories of, oh, my friends are going to think I'm like, what is happening? He's not the type of person to do that. It's a sign that we actually think that about ourselves and we are projecting those thoughts onto the other people in our lives. Sometimes they're true, but not always. And so it's a really interesting thing to look at within yourself of what part of you thinks, what are you doing?
Yeah, maybe I actually do see a lot of truth in that, and I will say I think I am. You asked me even what was it like 5 minutes ago? Do I think I'm a better person after I started this podcast? I'd like to say that I am, just because I don't know if emotionally I'm more aware of myself. I'm able to make more mature decisions, and I don't know if that's causation correlation. I don't know what that is. I don't want to be scientifically insignificant, but I would like to say that from the point that I started the podcast, the growth that I've had
Hmm.
is at a different rate than the growth I've had before I started the podcast.
It makes sense to me because you face the fear. And I do think the more that you learn about yourself, um, for me at least, it has created a lot more compassion and love for other people. Like the more I've shown myself love and compassion, the more I'm able to give that to others to recognize we all have fears. We all have things we're facing and dealing with and worried about. And if I can face them in myself, I can hold more space for other people going through that as well.
You said something that was really interesting. You said we tend to learn more about ourselves. Do you think that is linked with facing our fears? That when you face your fears, you learn the most about yourself?
I think so. Yeah.
Why?
You don't fear things you don't really care about. You don't, fear is, it's important. I mean, it's one of the most common emotions humans have. And when you understand what it is that you fear, it'll show you also what you care deeply about.
When we face our fears, it shows what we actually care about.
And I think what you care about, what you value, is a really important key to understanding who you are and, your identity.
So is that a path? Is that a way of investigation to even figuring out your desires? Because I think a big thing is a lot of us don't know, especially as 20-year-olds, college students, what we want to do in life. It's a
Yeah,
good way of actually figuring it out, asking ourselves what we're scared of.
I think it could be. Yeah, I mean, you're in this phase of your life, like you shouldn't know. It's
I know, yeah,
I
yeah, of
I would
course.
hope you didn't know. If you did, I would be, I bet in years to come there would be massive shifts and a recognition because you're still becoming. I mean, we all are, I think, but especially your 20s are meant to explore, and that would be something I would encourage you to look at is what are you afraid of? Can you be courageous enough to face the fear? And that takes a strong ego, a healthy ego to be able to do that, which is important and something that, you're in your 20s, you're still like strengthening and building. But I do think facing your fears, looking underneath that, being curious about what it has to show you, as well as what are you interested in naturally? Like, what are you drawn to? Those are all going to give you clues to, hey, you should look at that, pursue that, just learn more about that. The other thing that I think is a really interesting thing to do that people do not enjoy doing is also looking at what do you judge most in other people? And can you be curious about your judgments? Because those can often have some interesting insight for us as well.
Like what?
Well, typically, you think about when I'm judging someone else, and this depends. This is like a really big scale, and there's a lot of nuance here. But let's say I'm judging in the past, maybe judging someone for not having it all together or being able to, you know, practice art or do something that seems so out of my own comfort zone. Typically, in that judgment, there's something about me that I'm not allowed to do for whatever reason. And it's worthwhile to look at, why do I have a really strong reaction to this person? What's in there for me to learn so that I can understand what's going on for myself and maybe lessen the judgment that I have of them and lessen the judgment that I have towards myself as well.
That's interesting because I always had this concept as a kid in high school. It's like one of the number one words I think everyone uses is the word cringe,
Cringe.
and yeah,
Yes,
exactly,
exactly.
and I used to look at this word cringe and go, why am I cringing at this person or why are they cringing at me? And I think it's almost like whenever we cringe at someone or whenever someone's doing anything cringe, it's almost like they've been given a moment to be their true selves and we get so drawn back. We're like, whoa, that is
Yeah.
not okay because I'm not doing the things that I would truly would do and they are. So that's
Yeah,
cringe.
exactly. Well, and you can find a lot of things that you would genuinely enjoy in the cringe. I this is an interesting example I'll share with you. So I used to cringe so hard when I would see people crying on social media. They would take videos of themselves crying and then post it. I used to think, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. That's so cringy. And for me to look at that, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to be the type to cry on social
Hmm.
media, even still. Like there's nuance to that. Sometimes I do think it's a little manipulative and it can be exploitive. But I also can recognize when I used to cringe really hard at it, it was because I was so uncomfortable showing outward emotion like that. Like even in my relationships, it was very like I'm not allowed to be overly emotional, so I have to keep that locked in. So of course I'm going to cringe at someone who's doing it so publicly. So for me to look at that and recognize like, okay, maybe I can actually allow myself to be emotive, to especially in close relationships. Now, when I see that, I don't necessarily relate to it, but I don't cringe anymore because I've kind of faced that within myself. So, that's not something I technically enjoy, but I think we experience that a lot in like high school, middle school, high school, even some in college, where if someone's really interested in something that's not mainstream or really popular amongst everybody else, you cringe at it. And that's a normal, like, psychosocial developmental phase. And then I hope in the 20s and definitely 30s, and as we get older, you stop caring about that and you start actually doing things you enjoy. So you embrace the cringe. There's a lot of joy, fulfillment, and fun that can be found in that too. So yes, it's looking at, what am I so afraid of? Can I face that? What am I really drawn to and why? Can I like play with that too? And what makes me cringe? And
Hmm.
can I allow myself to, loosen up and maybe not judge myself or other people so hard and like be weird about it?
Around this concept of cringe, I
Mhm.
wonder if our own subjective definition of something being cringe is based off of our our self perspective or the people around us. Is it nature
Yes.
or nurture?
A lot of it, I think, that's in this, I don't actually know,
Yeah.
but my perspective would be a lot of this would be nurture. So when
Yeah.
we're growing up, especially through the ages of 0 to 7, we're creating so many new neural pathways because it's a lot to learn to be human. How do I function within my family, which is like those are the people you need to survive? How do I function within my peers? Because I need to learn how to do that in order to survive too. How do I function in my community? So you're taking in all of this information of, hey, as like to be with us, you need to belong. That's how you survive. So this is how we think about money. This is what we believe about, you know, other people or different, like this is who you are, like you're going to grow up and you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be this because that's success in our family. And so we get this programmed in, and the other part of that is like we are the type of people, we don't do these things. We are not, I have a friend who loves art, but in her family art was not taken seriously. It's not something you really need to pursue. We don't appreciate it. We don't care for it. So we kind of judge it. We make fun of it. So for her, despite this deep, love of it, she would judge it and say like, oh, I would never do that. I would never, waste my time trying to figure that out. That's not worth it. And then later in life, you come to this realization of like, oh, actually, I wanted that, but I was taught it wasn't allowed. And so I made it cringy for myself because I wasn't allowed to enjoy that and be that. And now that I'm dismantling that, I'm becoming aware of who I am on a deeper level. I actually want to pursue that. And now I have to overcome this programming that taught me I'm not allowed to. I have to overcome this judgment that was passed down to me that now is mine, so that I can do something that I genuinely want to do. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it does
yeah.
because I think it perfectly resonates with my situation as well because I grew up in a very different friend group than I don't know how to say it. In the friend group that I was part of in high school, the values that we had were nowhere near the values that I have when it comes to this podcast. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I felt very out of place in that friend group. That was the people that I surrounded myself with.
Yeah.
But once that we went off to college and it's almost like you're starting from scratch,
Hmm.
you I got an opportunity to almost explore my own perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's the annoying part is that I couldn't figure that out without changing my entire environment.
But that's okay. That's
Yeah.
normal. Yeah. That's how life goes sometimes is and that's the thing too. It's funny, my husband and I it was just his birthday this week, and so we were talking about life, and we were asking each other like if you could go back and tell your younger self, something, what would it be? And in the past, for me, I would have wanted to go back and given her advice to try to avoid pain, to try to avoid learning things the hard way, to try to do something different because I think it would be better for me now. And now, knowing what I do, and I'm 37, um, I think I would just tell her, like, hey, I love you. You're doing great, and it's enough. Keep going. Just keep trusting yourself and keep going. So there's not much about the paths that I took, the mistakes that I made, the wishing I had figured it out on my own instead of changing environments. I wouldn't do that. I would just allow myself to live and do the best that I can in each moment and know that that's what I was doing all along. And it led me here, and I'm excited for where that will take me in the future as well. Um, the fact that you're seeking that and you're asking these questions, that's huge. That takes a lot of courage to do, especially at the age that you're at. Um, it's not, I would say, typical at all.
No, I appreciate that. I do also think about how in this context of how our environment shapes us, I also do think about how to handle the feedback from others.
Mm,
And I think people struggle to, whether it's criticism or
mhm.
it's even the values that go around with the people around them, it's hard to actually digest what's going on.
It is. And especially, I feel like where you are right now, too, because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, obviously, but so much of our adolescence is taking feedback and learning because we don't know. We don't have wisdom yet naturally. Like you get wisdom with life experience and applying the lessons that you learn. Um, and you don't have that, so we are kind of reliant on other people's feedback and the way they're living to start to develop the path for ourselves. And then you're on this precipice of, well, you do have a little bit of experience now, and you have an intuition that is really wise. And it's about trusting that and following that and pursuing that and having the courage to do that despite the feedback. And the more you develop that sense of self-trust and identity outside of, how other people perceive you to be, the I think more resilient you can become to feedback. And you have some more awareness too nowadays, for me at least. I'm like, I take feedback seriously
Hmm.
from people I respect who care about me and know me and want what's best for me. Or like in work, like I take feedback seriously from clients and, the people that I'm working with on that level. When it comes to other people who maybe aren't living in a way that I would want to, maybe have differing values, um, without judging them, I just can understand, thank you for that. And I'm not going to take that in. That's not something I need to apply because I trust myself and know myself well enough now to know that this is the best way for me to move forward.
Yeah, one of the difficult things I encounter is I think my self trust and even my inner voice is also influenced by the voices around me. It's not like they're two
Mhm.
mutually exclusive concepts where I
Mm.
can compare the two. I think my inner voice is actually very much, I would actually say more than 50% is influenced by the other voices around me.
Yeah, that's so normal. That's where it takes time and practice to separate the two, to hone the two. And we're always being influenced by who we're around. Like your environment influences you heavily. And that is something we cannot always control, but as we grow up in adults and we have more agency, you have a little bit more control over. And so that's something to take very seriously of who am I surrounding myself with? Um, who do I, let see this part of me? Who do I share my dreams with, the things that I value with? Like that matters. As well as what environment am I putting myself in over and over and over again?
What is the practice to almost separate our inner voice and be able to see it as a
Mm.
different voice compared to the other voices?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think, I mean, for me, getting quiet, and really being still, learning to sit with myself, which is hard, not always fun. But in those moments, like if you can't distinguish between your own voice and the voices of others around you, I would say you've got way too much input coming in externally. And so we need to sit and we need to get quiet and we need to shut out the noise and we need to kind of ask, like, hey, what do you sound like? What,
Yeah.
like, have that relationship with that inner voice, with your intuition, and tune in and say, like, what do you sound like? What do you feel like? Where do I feel you? For me, my intuition strong, I get a very distinct feeling in my body, and I can't always explain it. And over time, I've learned to trust that instead of trying to over intellectualize it at times. I've made the biggest mistakes in my business and in my life by trying to intellectualize that voice because at the time it didn't, like some of the decisions it was pulling me towards didn't make sense logically. Um, and hindsight, I'm like, oh, it was spot on. And those were important lessons for me to learn because now I know you have to trust that, you have to listen to that. But that takes years of, or just maybe not years, maybe just consistently getting quiet, learning how to hear it, learning to what it feels like, and learning to listen.
Yes, I think the separation of the inner voice actually allows us to reflect on the external voices as well. Because
Yes.
your point about who we choose to have a drink with, who we choose to have to sit down with, who we choose to work with, who we choose to partner with,
Hmm.
all those decisions can be more efficiently created if we're able to actually distinguish between our inner voice and what our inner voice wants.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And asking yourself, like, you kind of hit this earlier. You're like, oh, it's ego. Like the reason I want 10,000 downloads is ego. And I think that's great to know. And I would always encourage you to continue asking yourself. I'm not judging it either. Like just saying like, okay, egoically, that would be really nice. And sure, that's fair. But on a deeper level, does it feel fulfilling? Is it leading you to actually where you want to go with your life? Is it helping you become the man you want to be? Like those are the deeper questions to it that maybe yes, maybe no, maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know. But for you to sit down and get quiet and start to learn, like, what does my inner voice sound like? Who am I without the influence of everyone else?
What does that look like for you? That silence, that sitting down with the inner voice.
Yeah, for me, meditation is a really powerful way. Journaling is another way. I really love journaling in a way of like kind of subconscious brain dumping. It's really
Hmm.
helpful in the morning. I don't know if you've heard of Julia Cameron, the Artist's Way author. She coined the term morning pages, where you sit down and you have to write 3 pages of just like a stream of consciousness. And so for me, it's, you can really get to know yourself on an interesting level, especially about when you get to a page and a half. That's when things really start coming through because at first that's a lot to write, even for me, and I love journaling. But those ways have been really powerful, just like sitting in the quiet, paying attention to your thoughts, paying attention to the sensations of how you feel, like that connection to your body is really, really important when it comes to intuition.
Yeah, I almost bring this up on every podcast. One of my good mates, Sean Pritchard, I had him on the show. He's gonna kill me because I can't remember what waves it is. He does say that when you journal in the morning, it's like some alpha, gamma. There's some like gamma.
Oh
Is it
yeah.
gamma? I can't remember. But like once
I
you wake
don't,
up, like you're able to access the subconscious easier.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. There's like theta, yeah, there's all kinds of different
It's
ones.
yeah, it's something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because of what happens, and the same thing with like I love actually visualization as well. Just your subconscious has so much to show you, and it does this in dreams when you're literally asleep, but it can do this in visualization too. You get into that state of consciousness where your conscious mind can chill out and take a break, and your subconscious can come forward, and it's highly symbolic, and there's some interesting things that sometimes don't make sense but can provide a lot of insight to who you are, kind of in the hidden, to your literal hidden mentality, can really show you so much there. And so being curious about that and getting yourself into that meditative state where you can allow your subconscious to come through and show you things. And I do this a lot, especially when I have decisions that I'm not clear on, or if I have a really big fear about making a decision, like let me get quiet and let me meditate, visualize, let me journal, let me get into this state. It is helpful early in the morning for sure. But and let me see what wisdom I can find there. And it's profound in how it works.
I will say my dreams have a lot of shit going on. I don't know if all of them make sense. Like sometimes I have like Humpty Dumpty eating like an omelet, and sometimes it's
Yeah.
like actually Rishi Kurata. So it's hard to like find which ones actually make sense.
Hmm.
When it comes to my inner voice, though, I will say at times it can be very self-deprecating. That's a word, right? Is
Yeah.
that a word? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, making sure.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
can sometimes be like yes, the external voices around me can negatively, not negatively, but like they can put me off. My inner voice can put me off as well, even when I separate it. How do I work around
Abs-
that?
well, so I would be very curious who that sounds like, that harsh, self-deprecating inner voice.
Ooh, who that sounds like? What do you mean? You think like there's an actual source that comes from?
Typically, it's learned.
I do not know. That is a very good question. Where does my inner voice's self deprecation come from? Maybe this is not the answer that you typically get, but I don't think it's anyone voicing it onto me. I think it's almost like my perspective of what, for example, my father works incredibly hard,
Hmm.
and it's almost like I can sometimes see that he may have a very high standard for himself and he may have a self-deprecating voice. So I don't know if it's not like he like harasses me and screams at me. It's almost like I've
No.
maybe seen that self-deprecating voice and I've taken it in my head. That's what my first instinct is. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
actually the truth. I don't like it's
It's
hard.
a very common answer.
Is
I have
it?
a, oh yeah, oh yeah. And not to blame parents, but we love them. But typically, I'm a mom, and my son is almost 2. And one thing I've heard over and over again is his inner voice will be mine and my husband's. The way that we talk to ourselves about ourselves is how he will learn to speak to himself, to treat himself. Of course, if you have a parent actually saying awful things to the child, that's definitely going to impact it. But he's going to watch the way that we handle failure, how we handle disappointment, how we speak to one another, and how we treat ourselves. And he will learn to mimic that. He will learn to treat himself that way too. And so it's a really mindful. Mine is, we all have these voices that are really self-deprecating. For me, mine used to be awful. I'm like, no one would speak to me. No one can hurt me the way that I
Mm.
have. No one can say like, no one's going to be meaner to me than me here, to be real. And so for me though, learning to get to know that part of myself, the mean part, the that's so harsh, has been huge. So I, instead of being like, shut up, you're the worst, like I want to lock you away. Actually, that's a younger part of me, typically. That really mean version is scared. There's a lot of fear there. It has a reason. It's trying to, coerce me into doing what it wants me to do. And it's a signal of like, oh man, that's a wound at a certain age that if I can look at and I can hear her out in a compassionate way, and compassion's not like, oh, you're right, like it's fine. It's not very permissive. It's like, hey, I love you. You have worth and value. Let me hear you out. And here's what we're going to do that's in our best interest because I
Mm.
care about you that much. And so getting to know that harsh voice on that level of, hey, where are you coming from? Why are you so harsh? Like, what do you want for me? What are you afraid of? What do you need from me in this moment? Can we have that conversation? And I've done that in journaling too. It's like having that kind of dialogue conversation with that voice that is harsh, that is self-deprecating, because I would say that's not maybe your intuition speaking. That's not like that wise inner voice that is kind and loving. That's a fear-based voice that's trying to keep you safe in some warped way. And when we can communicate with it healthily and openly, it loses some of its venom.
Yeah. Do you think, I know this sounds weird, but like, I know that my inner voice, as much as it can be a prick, what I've realized is the criticism that affects me the most, even when it's external, it
Hmm.
tends to be when I feel like there's a bit of truth in it. Like,
Always,
yeah, that's when it hurts the
always.
most, especially when I get like someone being an absolute jackass to me and they've said something really stupid to me and I just go, God, like I'm pissed, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
the reason I'm getting pissed is because maybe they're right. Like maybe like
Mm,
my essay was horrible. Maybe
mm.
I played terribly on the football pitch the other day. It's one of those things, and I know it can be not that deep, but it's just like it gets to me when I know like deep down that there is an element of truth in it.
Absolutely. And so that's valuable to think about. And there's a difference between feedback of like, hey, like Rishi, this essay, this wasn't up to the standard that we know you can produce. Like that's a very loving thing
Mm.
for someone to show you, because that what that says is like, I see your potential, I see what you're capable of, and you're playing down to that. And I want you to rise to the bar that we know you can hit. That's different from straight up like criticism of like who you are and that inner voice of, maybe it's highlighting something you do believe about yourself, about your worthiness, about something that's probably not true, but that's hitting that like, oh, I'm not good enough in this way. I'm not, adding to that. And that's where we need to look at of if this is hitting on, oh, they made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And that hit really hard because I kind of believe that about myself. That's a belief I need to work through. I need to excavate. I need to understand what needs to be healed in me so that I can shift and move forward and know that no, you are worthy. Even when you fail, that doesn't impact that. You can improve, you can get better. That's what helps that growth mindset as well. Um, so yeah, I would make that distinction between the two, between like feedback that is sometimes hard to hear, but overall loving and helpful versus straight up criticism that is designed to tear you down.
And I will say, we spoke about the fact that we should trust our inner voice when we get negative criticism from others, but sometimes we can also trust the external voices when we get negative inner criticism. So, for example, when I
Mm,
met you at Sam's book launch, for the first, I think I was there with my best mate Flint, and for the first 30 minutes, I was just not speaking to anyone. And I'm telling you this
mhm.
now because I was telling Flint this as well, and Flint noticed it like 30 minutes in. The first time someone came up to me and spoke to me, I wasn't I wasn't that receptive to it. Not because I'm not a prick. Like I like talking to
Yeah.
people, but because I think I believed to myself that I didn't deserve to be in that room. As a
Mm,
20-year-old, as a person who's this is the 17th episode of the podcast, as a person who just started this podcast 6 months ago, I was like, I could tell myself or I could feel myself downplaying myself. And Flint, I think, after that first conversation, goes, Reesh, what the hell are you doing? And goes like, why are you being so naive? And like, why are you downplaying it? Like, it doesn't matter whether you think it
mhm.
or not. You're here anyway. And if you're here, that means you deserve it. And that allowed me to just go, you know what, screw it. Like, I'm just gonna talk to people because
Yeah.
I'm here. Like, I may as well. If what I realize that is, if I'm there, I deserve it. And I don't know if that's like an overall universal thing to just hold, but I realize that I tend to downplay myself, and sometimes external voices can actually help me push me out of my internal criticism.
Absolutely. And that's why who we're around and the environment we're in is so important. That's something when I was training to become a coach, one of their like cornerstone ideas is as a coach, whoever I work with, it is I have to commit to wholeheartedly believing in them. And so we say, as my coach, like my belief in you is greater than your doubt. So when you doubt you, you can borrow belief from me because I don't doubt
Mm,
you, because I see your potential. I see how amazing you are. I see what you're capable of. I have no doubt in your ability to do this. I don't have the insecurities about you running through my mind. I don't have the voices of doubt. Like I see you in a room. You're in this room, be in this room. Don't question whether or not you deserve it. Be where you are and like accept that. That's amazing. And so that's something that can be really profound in relationship with other people. It's really powerful.
yeah, I like this idea. Surround yourself with people that believe in you more than you believe in yourself at times.
Yeah, and vice versa. It feels so good to believe in other people. It's my favorite part of my work.
Mm, mm. And like I was reading, I forgot whose newsletter it was the other day, but there was this gorgeous quote by Van Gogh, which goes, "If I'm worth something now, I'm worth something later." Or no, if I'm worth something later, I'm worth something now.
Hmm.
For wheat is wheat, even if it is grass in the beginning.
Yes, I saw that quote too. I wonder if we're on the same newsletter. Was it James Clear?
I think it was Chris Williamson,
Okay, I don't know who that
but
is, but
but James Clear, he probably took it from James Clear, or maybe it is James Clear's, because I
I
am on
don't
his
know.
newsletter too. But it is when
That's
I
a
saw
great
that quote, I
quote.
thought that was so good, and it helped
Yeah.
me. Like I know I'm not the type of person to just. I mean, some people I like to like gain so much satisfaction from quotes, but like for me, that was like holy, like that is so
Yeah.
good.
Oh, I am. I love a quote. I love quotes so much. I love reading, so that's where that comes from. I have gained so much wisdom and insight from reading quotes like that. But I love that, and that's the thing too. Is for you, it's and this is that part of like self-acceptance that so, can be so radical. Um, if you completely accept yourself, even the parts that you maybe don't like or you think are quirky and weird and you don't want everyone to see, like especially those parts, you don't have to like them, but accept them at least. It allows you to be where you are. It allows you to show up to an event like that and instead of questioning, do I belong here? Like, what am I doing here? You don't. You're just like, well, I'm here. And
Mm.
so I'm worth something. I'm going to be here. I'm going to learn. I'm just going to be myself. That is what so many people are craving. And I work with that. I have entrepreneurs who have been incredibly successful, who have earned their way, if they needed to, onto stages and into rooms and still question, who do I think I am? So it's really not about earning that. It's about just recognizing you because you exist, you deserve to take up space. And if you can accept who you are and you can be where you are, there's so much to gain from that. And it's a lot more fun to to show up and live that way.
Jen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I do this with all my guests when I record an episode because you're a lot wiser than me. So, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Mm. Oh, that's a really good question. That's a big question. Man, the best piece of advice I've ever received. I mean, simply, I think it's just be where you are.
What do you mean?
Be where you are. Be present where you are. Be with yourself where you are. Accept where you are. There's like a level of acceptance, I think, in that statement for me, um, where I'm not trying to force things to be different. I think there's a lot of different philosophies on the idea of resistance is what creates suffering in life. And so for me, it's just a way of accepting who I am in the moment, being who I am in this moment, and being exactly where I am. Because that's all we have. I mean, ultimately is this present moment. And so being here, enjoying that, being present for it all, the good and the bad, the hard and the easy, that has been profound for me.
Love it. Jen, where can we find you
I
and what
know.
is next?
Oh, what's next? You can find me at my website, jenniferdiaz.com. I write a weekly newsletter, the Monday Mindset newsletter, that I'm the most consistent with content. And right now, I recently started a Substack that for me, I've been enjoying growing called Unlocked with Jennifer Diaz. So you can find me there too. And on Instagram at Jen M. Diaz.
Love it. You wrote an awesome Substack the other day, know about how to handle feedback.
Oh, yeah, I
I
did.
saw that.
Thank you. Thank
That's
you.
where I got the idea. It was good.
Thank you so much.
Anyway, Jen, thank you so much for coming on. It means
Thank you
the
for
absolute world.
having me. I enjoyed this conversation very much. Thank you.